Thanks for tuning in to the Auburn Business Ventures Goldmine Podcast. I'm your host, Cody Monroe. I'm here to extract and present the stories of local business owners and entrepreneurs. Today's episode of the podcast is with Mike Mendelson of SKALE, the only behavioral training platform built for organizations to track their team's skill levels, deploy new sales ideas, and hold team members accountable to practicing. I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, Mike Mendelson with SKALE.
Yes, sir.
Now, is it SKALE Education? Is it the SKALE, or is it SKALE?
Internally, we call it SKALE,
Okay.
but legally, we're SKALE Education Incorporated, and we're definitely an education company.
Okay. And why don't you tell everybody what SKALE is, or at least the idea of it? Because it's kind of, when you first explained it to me, I literally had no idea what you were talking about.
Weird. It's the nature of anything someone's trying to build from nothing, right? Like, how do you make it make sense to someone in a few seconds, enough for them to understand the thing you're talking about? When you want to tell someone kind of everything and why it's so neat, but then the work is to like give someone enough to be able to engage with it and even ask an appropriate question. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to explain it, and it turns out it's pretty easy.
Do you spy on my Facebook? Because I posted the other day about how when you have a grand vision for something, it's really tough to package up an explanation for somebody sometimes, because you either do it not enough justice by oversimplifying, or you nail it and you just got to be okay with them not understanding.
I did see that. Yes, that's exactly where this is coming from. You captured it perfectly, right? Because it's 5 years of thinking. 5 years of thinking with a team who's been like working with customers and thinking about what is it and why is it that way.
Right.
And you can't share that in 30 seconds.
Okay. So you got,
but I can right now.
Right. Yeah. You got way more than that.
Yeah. We do training for distributed teams.
Okay. And what's the main platform or like tool that you have at your creation?
Yeah, like what's the thing?
Yeah, what's the thing? So it's like, how do you accomplish that?
Yeah, the way that most people interact with it is a mobile app, and they meet with someone else at the company they work for through a one-on-one video chat. You're like, well, what's the difference between that and Zoom or that and Facebook Messenger? And the difference is that you're not trying to call somebody and saying, I want to talk to Cody. Instead, you're saying, I'm ready to learn X. Or I'm ready to teach Y. Mm-hmm. And so you essentially you teach the things you know, you learn the things that you're ready to learn, and you learn it from or teach it to the right partner. And so what SKALE does is it manages the whole kind of knowledge map of your company, and then uses what we know about what people know to connect the right people with each other to teach and learn from each other.
Right. So we're talking a knowledge map. See, that I think that's a really clear way of putting this in a way that it differentiates it from any video chat software. Yeah,
video chat's just like we're looking at each other in the eye right now. Like, how'd you meet with Cody? We were sitting at a table.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Like that's gonna be that's just part of how we interact. But like how and why and with who and when, that's where we.
So essentially. Or to simplify and package this for somebody who's listening, SKALE you could think of as an app that allows organizations to deploy, I don't want to just reduce it to training, but deploy knowledge, right, in an organized way because it's mapped out. And now I have, you've talked to me about how this all works, so I already know this. Mm-hmm. So the employees in an organization are educating each other.
Yeah, essentially, it if you are a business owner and you have a distributed team, either by necessity because you're wireless, you own a bunch of AT&T stores and they're just by definition distributed. Mm-hmm. People are in different stores. Mm-hmm. Or you're remote by choice. There's a lot of reasons to go remote.
Right.
And when you do, you lose something. What are the things you lose? So one of the things you lose are like in the hallway, like knowledge sharing conversations. Mm-hmm. So for either of those kind of teams, what we kind of bring into their day is a daily, meaningful conversation. So at some point,
it's like scheduled too, or some it may.
It's
or
like
may,
we like at some point during the day, and we try to we figure out where that fits for different companies, and we try to do it like as much as possible, like in the wild. So based on your real day, like right after lunch works for this company, but sporadic during this time works for this other company. So we got to make it fit in people's real day. But at some point during the day, your job is to get on once.
And to have a SKALE session. Right.
Yep. And whether you're teaching or learning or what you're learning or teaching depends on that day. But you're always moving forward or moving someone else forward.
Right. And in expanding on, the example of a wireless retail company.
Yeah, like where you go buy your new cell phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Salespeople, right, is kind of primarily where this could work. Let's just say, because like there's maybe 5 to 10 salespeople per like one manager.
Yep.
Or like, and have you guys thought about like within
we think
management?
more about like there's one director of training and there's 6,000 retail salespeople. Like I used to be a high school math teacher, and I had 1 on 30, and when we got to 34, they're like, union, this is a problem. And these guys have 1 on 6,000.
Right. Now, is that like a typical structure that you know, or do you know? Like, that seems crazy to put one person in charge.
Well, training's not most people's business, right? Most people's business is their thing. So sales is their business. Wireless is their business. Retail is their business. Acquiring the right place is their business. And at some point in every company's trajectory, they recognize that what people know directly impacts what their company can do. And then how quickly they can get people to know something new impacts what their company can go do tomorrow. So how nimble their company can be. So it's like, it's incredibly, as a teacher, I know it, but I get to kind of just like, I don't have to convince people of the fact that when people know more, you're better off.
Right. Like knowledge is power is like your mantra.
Sure. Yeah.
This is cool. And I think there's something to be said currently. I think there's a really big growing culture of self-improvement. And I don't know, like, it's like, has that always been the thing? And it's just kind of happening in a different way now because we're all so connected. How did it work before? It was like you went and bought like a Tybo tape and popped it in. And,
sure.
I mean, that's worked out at home or maybe like some Tony Robbins seminar that's like on a VHS or something, right?
Yeah, we should ask our parents, like, because at some point, like, they reckon, like, you go K-12, you're in school. You're in school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and you spend all of your day self-improving to the point where you hate it. Like, by the time you graduate, you're like, well, I served my time. And then you go into the workforce, and if you're lucky, your job cares about your learning. But you, at some point, come to, like, especially if you have kids, you're like, you watch your kids learn, you're like, whoa, I watch how fast they grow and grapple with stuff. I should be grappling with stuff too, because I should still be learning how and why and what. I want to be the best version of myself for my kids. I want to make sure I'm teaching them the right thing. Like there's some deep human stuff there that I'm sure we're not the first generation to think about self-improvement, but the mediums that we have to engage with it are completely fundamentally different.
Right. And it's kind of, well, it's hyper accessible. So like you take one person, out of these millions and millions of people who have social media accounts, and there's a lot more than one, by the way, but one example person, and they have like maybe an Instagram or something, and all day they just post. And honestly, like Auburn Business Ventures kind of posts this kind of content. Like I think yesterday or the day before I posted, work on yourself relentlessly, with a fire emoji. And it's like, I actually truly like feel that in my heart, like on my inside, like that's what you should do. And I think take like an example salesperson in a big company, they may or may not have that outlook. But if you actually have a scalable way to at least plant the seed in them that like, hey, if you perform better, you should probably be happier with yourself. I mean, you if they're commission based, they're making more money, right? That gives a person a lot of fulfillment when they win. Now, like I'm curious, has that been so far in your deployment? Like, have you seen examples like of somebody who grabbed onto it and kind of started to run with it and excel, and you're like, oh, you're a superstar, like, good job. And it's kind of like you planted that seed, like, that they may have never excelled like that before. I'm not asking for a specific person. I'm just kind of wondering, like, do some people not take?
Well, so it's something that like in the category of exercise or meditation or eating well that of course you should do, but how? And that how, like, is it take lots of classes? Because sometimes classes are terrible,
Right.
like, the time you put in needs to be really effective. If I do 10 push-ups right now, I know it's good. I hands down know it's going to be, I've been productive.
Right.
If I sit for 10 minutes and meditate, productive. But the training has to be good. And so what does good training look like? It looks like this. Two people having a conversation together. We're both engaged. I can't tune out and participate in this podcast well. Either can you.
Right.
And so that's like our medium of one-on-one.
I see what you're saying. There's a you're locked in.
You're fully locked in. You have to be.
Right.
And there's research to support it that says, like,
it happened or it didn't type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you take a classroom 1-on-30, and you I'm going to go a little math and I'll come out of it. I was a math teacher, so I won't go too deep. But like a normal classroom, one teacher, 30 kids. It follows a normal distribution.
Right.
You move to one-on-one and moving at your own pace. It moves the 50th percentile kid to the 98th percentile.
Now, is this like what they retain?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So the C kid, the average kid, turns into the A+ kid. All of them. So, and it's because of some really deeply human things, right? Like, if I know you're listening to me, I'm going to talk more. I'm talking more right now because of your body language. Of like we've been talking to each other one-on-one since we were created as a species and before.
Right.
And then the other side is that teaching is one of the best ways in the world to learn. It's a hack that I've used through my entire life, and now everyone gets so and all of a sudden now we're your listeners, part of probably why you started this podcast is kind of out of the like goal of teaching. Like, you want to move a community forward.
For sure.
But on a typical podcast, you end up as a listener, which is really productive in a lot of ways. But then imagine now you then get to go participate in that podcast. You listen to Joe Rogan interview Elon Musk, and then the first person gets in and chats with Elon Musk and makes sure they understood what they just learned. And then they go and teach it to someone else. And like, everyone has to kind of they call it retrieval. Like, you have to take the thing, it's floating around your head somewhere. You got to pull it out and share it with somebody. Like, this stuff gets deep. It works, and you feel when it works. So you watch someone. So you asked about like concrete examples, and it's fun getting to see someone who has their first SKALE session, and they literally say, "I hate this. I have too much to do, and this is kind of weird."
Well, I feel like most people kind of get irritated when something else gets put on their plate.
Always.
Especially if they're not in charge.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
But then they find out they are. That's one of the beauties is like, oh, do this other training thing. Click on these buttons. Watch these videos. You have to do it. Compliance. And if not, I'm going to give you a hard time. We hear they get on, and all of a sudden they're the teacher. They're like, oh, now the expertise.
There's ownership.
There's ownership, and it works like crazy. Yeah.
And what I kind of like about the idea overall is, like, look, I don't care, like, what anybody thinks about technology and how much we're on our phones and all this. I'm like, honestly, there's so much good to be had. I think it just takes a little bit of personal balance to make sure that, we don't have the negative effects.
Sure.
If whatever they are. But
how do you think about balancing that with you got kiddos? How do you guide them to interact with their tech?
Literally, it's the only tech that. Well, so for everybody's context, my oldest is 4.5.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got 4.
I've got a 5 too, so we're on the same boat.
So the only tech that he really, or they, really interact with is the TV shows, or not actual TV, like cable, but like Disney or
yeah,
streaming, and we have scheduled times for them to watch that. Now, I'm sure there's another side of the coin to that, which is like, oh, are you like deeply ingraining some sort of like scheduled dependence? It's like, probably. I don't know, but it lets us cook dinner.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We're not carrying a tablet with us to give them in the car whenever we go places. Like literally, like showtime is like when we're making dinner.
Yep.
And probably, I mean, you know, if I'm out here in the morning, I'm sure they're watching in the morning while, you know,
yeah,
my wife is trying to.
So you balance it. You help them find a balance.
Yeah, like there's definitely times when they're just like, no, you don't get to watch the show.
Totally.
I don't care how much you ask.
And then you help them build that mentality for balance in the way that like our parents didn't know to do with us because it wasn't so everywhere. A thing that I've pushed with my own is, and I push my friends with kids, that there's a difference between consuming and creating using technology. Right now we are clearly creating using technology. We're having a conversation. We're both growing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like my kid will pick up the iPad and the iPad pencil and color and grab the things he can create are different from anything that our generation could have created with a crayon.
That would have blown our mind.
Right? What color is the sun? Bright yellow.
Right.
No, it's not. My kid takes a picture of the sun, grabs that color from his color palette, and that's how he colors the sun.
He uses a little color picker.
Yeah. And so like it is part of our world. But the work to part of what we have gotten better at SKALE with our customers is helping drive. So we say it's a meaningful daily conversation, and that we can promise a business owner that your people are going to have a daily meaningful conversation,
right?
Despite the fact that they're busy. And maybe like think about someone, a day in the life of and go back to that AT&T salesperson. They're not thinking about their phone very much. They have real people coming in the store,
right?
And they're responding to that first. So then how do you get them to say, okay, stop for a second,
right? Go in the back.
Take time out to do something that doesn't make me money right now. It's not a project that I'm actively working on. It's a different kind of collaboration. It's collaboration just to make you better.
I mean, how long are the sessions typically?
7-ish minutes.
Okay, so like if I was running shop,
yep.
And I got, Susie, Frank, Bill, and Bob, out front, and it's Bob's turn to take lunch. It's kind of like take lunch 7 minutes early.
Yeah. Exactly.
That does not sound too...
And we make it really easy for teams to do that. We like pre-write emails for managers to send to say like, hey, exactly what you said. Hey, just take it 7 minutes early.
I love that.
It's not a big deal.
That's a really good example of... like over servicing your customer in a way where it's almost like, no, it's offloading ownership. And I find that is the number one issue, even in my business as a marketing agent. There's a million of me, I have a million quote unquote competitors. And what business owners really want is somebody to offload ownership onto. Whether it's in marketing or training, or they're too busy to want to make the decision. Now you get some people who really at least want approval of every decision, or at least want to be able to vet it.
Yeah. But
I feel like I've talked to a lot of business owners lately, and it's something along the lines of, well, first of all, I have to figure out who to trust. Then I have to figure out, is it in our budget? Then I have to figure out, how are the numbers going to work out? And then they, in their mind, they just go down this rabbit hole, and eventually it's just like, I'm not hiring anybody. I'm not doing it. It's too much like on my plate. I already barely have enough time. And so I love that you have like pre-written emails that you can hand off to them. Like, look, it's on a platter. Like you're getting rid of the work. The barriers to them actually implementing.
They just make training happen.
Just you're doing it.
And what you said, the two words you said are worth zooming into and double clicking on. You said offloading and ownership. You can offload. You can hire someone and think that you're offloading, but then you're managing. You're instead of becoming instead of offloading it, you become a manager for that thing, and maybe that's great. And for some things, you should do that. But when you say offloading ownership, you're saying essentially, someone else is going to look at this the way that you would.
That's right.
Who happens to have this other skill set.
Right. And that's, I identified, well, by preparing the work for them and saying like, hey, look, you can just like copy and paste in your employee's name into this email.
Oh, we
can automate
put the
it.
list of names. Here's a spreadsheet with all the names of people who practiced yesterday, and the email you should send them.
I mean, that's
and
beautiful.
Here's the list of people who didn't practice yesterday.
The last thing anybody wants is to have to write another email.
Sure. And at some point, it'd be really nice if it's sort of a clean UI where they don't have to like, they can edit and make it contextualized to today and their own company, and then just go poof. But right now, you see the names and you forward it along. But yeah, the work is to find someone who knows the training or marketing for you, in your case. Of course, they need to go like find their audience in your case, or make their people better in mine. And they know that they respect the craft enough, the craft of teaching, the craft of marketing, and say like, let's let someone run with it. But that person has to be watching. So we watch one thing that we integrate with, if you're a sales company, we integrate with your sales data.
Nice.
And so we can say, all right, this person's done X number of sessions and mastered X number of skills, kind of like through our platform. And here's some other outside metrics that also tell us a little about what this person is capable of and what they're ready for.
Put on a timeline.
On a timeline. And so then it's a matter like we teach in two ways. If you think of like your teachers, they did two things. They shared the information with you. They checked to make sure you knew it and built experiences for you. They did all that, but then they also spent time trying to motivate you to do your homework and show up to class.
The point systems.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we've got a leaderboard exactly like that. So we take on the role of like, we are the teacher, like teaching as a service. And I get excited for a future where you can learn just as much at work as you did while you were in school. You just happen to learn, it just happens to be about your craft and contextualized to something you're going to go do that day with customers or with clients that school never had. School never had that ability.
You know, it's interesting. You remember the previous conversation we had about the education system and, you know, kind of debating where.
For context, Cody and I were talking about like, what do we do with our children?
That's right. Yeah, this is like
this is a new world. What opportunities exist and how do we make sure that we're giving them the best?
Right.
For context.
Yeah, of course. And that was a couple weeks ago, and now it's like I'm still in the same, you know, discovery learning phase. But,
honestly, me too.
But I guess I bring it up because you mentioned, you know, now you can learn as much at work as you did in school, and I actually questioned that statement, and I was like, well, doesn't everybody learn more at work than they did in school?
Yeah, it is already a better place to learn, but how nice would it be if you had a great teacher alongside you to like watch you do it and say, hey, you're doing great here and great here. Do this thing tomorrow. Take 5 minutes to do some push-ups. You'll be a little stronger. To coach alongside you to say like,
I can definitely vouch for that.
Yeah.
I had a previous job working at an engineering firm in Sacramento, and I was doing geographic information systems, which is basically computer mapping, like actual mapping, like maps so that you know where things are. And the way that technology works is all database backend and programming, basically, and automation to produce maps out of like huge sets of data. And my boss at the time was like really good at program. I mean, like, and he made sure, like, he really challenged me where it was like, hey, this is the goal. And he let me take a swing. And it's like, okay, well, that was terrible. I like the way you're thinking though, you know, but no, that doesn't work. And this is why. And you'd actually take the time to sit there and like write out the script, or like I would write it on the whiteboard, you know, in his office. You know, I'm like writing computer code like on a whiteboard, and he's sitting there and he's like, you know, yes, no, yeah, and eventually he's like, and this is why. And then I take a picture of it and I go back to my desk and I start punching it in the computer and I let it rip and it works. And it's like, wow, that's the one-on-one, the power of one-on-one.
Totally.
And a lot of that, it's like kind of like, I mean, learning computer language, it's a language, right? So imagine if you have a one-on-one Spanish teacher or whatever foreign language, you're going to learn at a far faster rate.
Yeah, and that learning compounds over time. So I have a million things that I want to say after that, sharing that story. First of all, I'm not saying that stuff's not happening already in great business cultures. That's what's so exciting.
Right.
Like, it's already, we've all had experiences like that.
Mm-hmm.
He probably learned a lot by teaching you. Something like GIS has we call it low floor, high ceiling. There is no limit to how powerful you could get in your GIS skill set.
Right.
There's no ceiling.
Right.
And to go deeper, you're gonna play with it. You're gonna get jammed, and he gets you unstuck.
Right.
He did a lot of other really good things too. And I heard you correct yourself. You said he did it for you, and they're like, no, he had me do it first.
Oh yeah,
which is key, and you can do that one-on-one. You can't have a whole class of people do it first and then give everyone feedback.
I'm wondering if that was like a Freudian slip, because it's something along the lines of, when you learn something new, it feels like you put something in your brain, or like you get it from somebody, which is, I'm sure, the scientific way it works, right? It gets input into your, like, because some people talk about how like learning is like discovery rather than something being input. It's like there's like different ways of saying it, right? But yeah, it's like, no, you do, there's a lot of value in actually doing it yourself and having somebody kind of oversee in a respectful way.
It's huge. We had, when I was teaching high school math, where this thing came from, I was a high school math teacher up in Grass Valley. The school was called SKALE, or Sierra Academy of Expeditionary Learning.
Whoa.
Killers. Yeah, long name. I can take it apart if you want, but I won't yet. Amazing high school in Grass Valley. If you've got, actually, they're in Nevada City now. Just got a beautiful brand new campus.
Nice.
What I had that was different from most math teachers, was most math teachers have an algebra class or a geometry class.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 9th grade math class and a 10th grade math class. Happy to share why.
They purposely make it generic sounding.
Well, because each, I'll explain the excitement part of expeditionary learning. Expeditionary learning, an expedition is a semester-long project.
Okay.
That your math class, your English class, your science class, and your history class, and hopefully your electives, all contribute to.
Okay.
So, like, they're talking about building a dam here on the Bear River.
Right.
And so we worked with, in math, they worked with the in math and physics, they worked with the engineers to figure out what kind of dam. They went to the dam site.
Wow,
where should it be?
Right.
How much water is it going to hold, etc. In their English class, they went and interviewed the people whose houses were going to be flooded,
mm-hmm.
and told their stories. In their
kind of
social
turned
science
it into
class,
like a writing mini project,
all connected to high school English standards.
Right.
So for a lot of reasons, incredible school experience. Send your kids to expeditionary learning school. If there's one close, they're incredible.
So okay, just to be clear,
yeah,
they used the Bear River Dam, or Centennial Dam, whatever the technical,
yeah,
the one that's not built yet.
Yep.
And as a kingpin for the semester.
Yep.
And so all the classes somewhat revolved around that project as like an example kingpin. Yep. Center point.
Yep. And they do something, and they create something at the end that like uses everything they learned and connects it to the real world.
Is that kind of like the definition of
an expedition?
Right. Okay.
At an expeditionary learning school.
That's incredible, because that's how things actually kind of work, right? Is, we have this huge project, this huge goal, or in like maybe building a business, or maybe it's having a successful campaign of some sort, right? There's a lot that goes into that, and that's kind of the way the world works. Is it's for things to move forward, there has to be big goals, and building a dam is a pretty damn big project.
Damn big project,
right?
Damn project.
And so I think that's a huge cognitive like bridge to be had, for somebody where they have something to attach it to, rather than like algebra is formulas and geometry is, proofs and it's all obviously good. You have to know
what's so fun about teaching, whether you're teaching people in your business or kids, is that you're teaching the same stuff. no matter whether you're teaching math or you're teaching sales or you're teaching how to execute a process that someone else has built for some reason. You're teaching follow through. You're teaching perseverance. You're teaching patience.
The expedition. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a timeline.
Yeah. And so you can use we'd take a kid on a 16-mile hike, and 8 miles in, they'd be like, I quit. I want to give up. And I'm like, well, it's 8 miles back or 8 miles forward. So either we live here or we're going to finish.
And I'm not carrying you.
And then we go back to class, and they're struggling with a math problem. And you're like, remember how that other thing was hard and you were halfway through? We're halfway through this one too. So
Parallels.
go take a break. And we teach, when we use this to teach retail sales, for example, you teach people how to ask open-ended questions quietly or patiently. Ask open-ended questions and listen fully. Make your offer match something that the customer actually needs. So we're it makes the company more money. It makes the rep more money because their commissions go up.
They're selling more.
They're
performing better.
Also just like those are those lifelong skills that we do need to keep practicing. When I sell SKALE, sometimes I just talk at people.
Right.
Like, so like we're weaving all over the place, which is okay. Cool. But the fact that we use these contexts to teach pretty universal truths, is part of what's so exciting, because people do get better over time. I said at some point a couple minutes ago that learning is exponential. It builds on itself. So you can imagine you start getting those one-on-one conversations every day, and you master the first couple of things, you get to build more and more complexity over time. Where if you just put all of your training into onboarding, like here's the pamphlet, study up. All our processes, great. We're gonna go back to work.
Where does the quote?
It doesn't grow on itself.
Right. So where does the quote unquote curriculum come from?
Good question.
So does SKALE play a part in that, or is it kind of like a consultation with the client?
Essentially, it can be one of two ways. Our work is to sit with a domain expert, someone who really knows the thing, the owner of the company,
right?
A COO of the company, someone who knows a director of sales. They know how they want a thing to be done, and we've got a team of teachers who sit with them and learn fully. We'll ask follow-up. The things that teachers are good at is, if we don't understand, we're not going to pretend we understand. We're gonna ask follow-up questions and dig in deep to say, okay, what are the targets here? I hear how to do this. Let me break that into what in the high school math class we'd call standards. So we extract business goals and turn them into learning targets.
Okay.
And then from those learning targets, we create conversations. So we create a pathway of conversations that if people engage in, they will meet those learning targets, and then thus the business will hit those business goals.
So the learning targets are like rungs on a ladder, almost to that lead you towards the goal, right? Because you kind of have. Do you have to go in a linear curriculum style? Like chapter 1, chapter 2, or is there like multiple paths within? Like you have let's say you have one retailer, and they have 5 salesmen, people, I should say, 5 salespeople, and can you develop more than one? Because if I guess
forks in the path.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you don't have to do it necessarily in a certain order, or it may or may not work that way.
It's usually in a pretty specific order.
Okay.
And if I'm honest, that does bug me. I can't wait for the one day where we're going to tap into your brain and know what you really want to learn just then, or let you choose. Like I was so turned off once upon a time. I was going to take a kiteboarding lesson.
Right.
And I already knew how to fly a kite. I already knew how to wakeboard, and they were going to start me at square zero. And I was like, you know what? I'm not taking it. I'm not going to waste my time. I don't want to start at the beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But what we end up doing is we say everyone's going to start at the beginning, but the people who already have expertise, they're going to do 1 6-minute session, and then they'll be teachers for that thing.
Why don't you expand on that concept? So like instead of having, let's say, 5 people who are being educated, what if there's like 200?
Yeah.
Right. So like a much larger pool of people, and what we're kind of getting onto now is the distribution of knowledge becomes really powerful at this point.
Yep.
because as you learn and master each lesson, you become the teacher for it, and you can educate however many people after you. So it's kind of
Scales.
it scales. Yeah, it's kind of, you could educate 200 people on one lesson pretty darn quick.
Yeah, and without any burden from the source, from that first person who kind of deployed that knowledge out into the community.
And because I know everybody's thinking right now, how is this better than just recording a video tutorial and having somebody just stare at a screen and take a quiz after?
Yeah, there's a certain set of skills you can't learn passively. Like if I was to say, Cody, I want you to get stronger. Watch me do some push-ups.
Oh, that's funny.
Specifically, we're really helpful if the skill we're trying to build is a conversational skill. So if you're trying to train a manager to have a difficult conversation when someone's been late every day, or if you're trying to train a salesperson to ask open-ended questions again, like I was talking about.
This is great for role-playing. Because many companies use role-playing in their training.
Yeah, and if they're not, they should, for a lot of reasons. Because of what I'm kind of saying right now, that
you got to do push-ups.
The thing you're going to go do with a customer is you're going to say these things.
Right.
So learn it by practicing saying these things. And the first time you do it shouldn't be on game day. You should do it in practice with someone who sometimes the only role of the teacher is to nod and smile and say, keep going. Because it's weird to talk to yourself, and people don't. But the great teachers will always push someone to go a little bit deeper. And what's so fun when I talk about that greeting a customer first skill, people who've been doing it for 20 years recognize how they do it, or that they've fallen out of a habit in this other way, and they start to self-teach. But yeah, the biggest difference is that you're doing the thing that you're going to go do in the world. In education, we call it authentic assessment. You're being assessed and engaging in the activity in the way that you'll go do it in reality. To connect back to your Esri story, I don't know if it's Esri, but your GIS story.
Esri is the manufacturer of the GIS software.
Yeah. One of the things I'm really excited about are as we do more of our work digitally, we'll capture more information about what we know based on when we're doing our work, not when we're practicing, not when we're out of real world. We'll just know what people know based on how they do their work. For example, Autodesk is someone who we've worked with a little bit. They make
very familiar
AutoCAD, and a million other things. And since their stuff has been moved to the cloud, they now know that you use this tool a lot, this tool very little, and this tool never. And they had this map, and they say, if you're this kind of user today, you're probably an architect who builds homes in small towns. So you're like this other group, this other group. You're like these people. What will accelerate you to be like a better version of that person? Oh, you got to learn how to use this tool.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's teach you just in time.
So you're hoping to have like a smart system, like an adaptive system, almost like an adaptive curriculum. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Because no one likes, if you know, like we said, if you knew,
it's like
you can't waste your time on these learning things. And if it's not productive, people get turned off from learning. So there's a lot at stake. If you start putting out training, like all of a sudden people don't want to learn anymore, and that's one of the biggest failures of the school system that we talk about. I'm sure
it brings YouTube to mind. You know, you watch a video and it's like, oh, recommended for you.
Sure.
Granted,
exactly.
In my opinion, it's kind of gone downhill recently.
Because your kids are using your YouTube.
Somebody, I don't know. I'm like, well, I don't want that.
Baby Shark is not what I wanted to watch.
Well, that would be great, and so your role in the organization is
I spend most of my time with customers.
Okay.
So I call myself like chief education officer. I'm the lead teacher. I was the founder of I kind of built the concept in my math class. But
the concept of SKALE.
The concept of SKALE, like data-driven peer teaching in real time.
Right.
But most of my time I spend with customers, kind of in that, I think that offloading ownership role. I am their new head of training.
Right.
And I will make whoever's their appointed head of training look like a rock star. Or if they don't have one, I fill in for that.
I wish businesses would lean into that more in their structure and what their offerings are, than the offloading ownership, because then everything kind of becomes modular in a way, and things kind of can plug in nicely. But there's a certain level of trust that still has to exist. It's weird. The trust thing always has to be there.
This would be a cool conversation to like propagate through your audience, actually.
Right.
I would love to hear from a lot of different founders, business owners, people who are running this stuff day to day about what is important to keep core and what is worth using software for or an external team for.
Right.
Because we have there's some things that you build a way of making decisions as a team. I know that you and Charlie you can't outsource. You can't go find a Charlie for hire,
right?
Temporarily, you need someone to you guys need to learn together exponentially, over time,
right?
The skill set, the relationship gets deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another set of things that's not that, and that would be a really interesting conversation.
I think
people think together.
I think I'm coming at that more from the angle of the decision maker thinking more in that way. Rather than calling out the business saying, oh, the business should operate this way. More like the decision maker should. It's kind of like the Superman syndrome. I see it so much where it's one person trying to do everything. And it's you can have software to automate that. And you don't have to do it yourself. Or why don't you rearrange your website to work for you?
That's a little mindset flip to recognize that it's time to not do everything yourself.
That's right.
And people could do training themselves. The person, that guy who you talked about, your old supervisor who sat with you.
Right.
That's great. And that needs to keep happening. But again, it doesn't scale. And you want it to be part of the culture. You want it to be someone else has thought deeply about marketing or training.
Yeah. Now, this is the one thing I really wanted to talk about. And let's see, how far in are we? I can't even tell. Either way, it has to do with efficiency versus effectiveness. And so I was reading last night the book. It's by Stephen Covey. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there is a point made about that he makes, and I was deeply pondering this, and I'm like, I got to hear what Mike has to say. And that is, he made the point that when you're dealing with people, you can't expect efficiency, and you should be more in the mode of effectiveness, right? So take his example was his son was on a scheduling bender where he's scheduling every minute of the day, and he also happened to need to dump his girlfriend that day, and he scheduled a 15-minute time slot to call her and dump her. And he said the schedule went great until he had to call his girlfriend to dump her, which took an hour and a half, and that was just the beginning of that, and obviously screwed up the whole schedule. And what he was trying to explain is that people are more inconsistent than machines, for example, and so I think his point was that you're setting yourself up for frustration sometimes if you're in an efficiency mindset versus an effectiveness mindset. So if you're in an effectiveness mindset, it's I'm going to dump her, right? So that's what has to happen. It's not going to go on, right? What you really want is the end result. You shouldn't be thinking, I'm going to squeeze this in 15 minutes. No, you got to put this in the ground. You got to get it done, right? Now with SKALE, this is where it's interesting is you are dealing with people, right? It's person to person, it's all people. There's just an app that makes it more possible, right? Kind of facilitates the interaction.
Yep, computers are fast and people are smart.
Right. And I'm wondering if this is kind of a really super hack in a way where it's so I guess the question then becomes, does 7 minutes, you see what I'm saying? Do you redo the lesson if it's not in 7 minutes, right? Because we're going for effectiveness, right? That's the most important part, is the results. So do you, let's say you and I have a SKALE session, and I don't get it. I'm unable to master the concept.
Yep.
What's the process there to ensure that I do. Is it just a redo? Do I get another teacher?
So I want to. I'm hearing.
There's a lot. Sorry,
that was no. This is awesome. And
good
framing it makes it like there's a lot to attach to. This conversation is not very effective. We're not being very efficient. No, sorry, we're not being very efficient in this conversation.
That's right.
We're meandering.
Right. Exactly.
But it is effective, at least for like I'm enjoying it.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with not being efficient.
Totally. But you get into the mindset of if you feel like this has to get done in 7 minutes. I do watch people early on rush sessions and feel like, oh, this is quick. Go fast. Okay, you said your thing. I say my thing. Let's move forward. And like to be effective, patience and calm and full listening and debrief and maybe doing it again. Those are some of the human things that I'd want to instill culturally in our users.
Right.
Easier said than done. But what I can do algorithmically is at the end of every session, the teacher and the learner both rate the learner on whether or not they're ready to move on from that skill as a student, and then graduate to a teacher of that skill. Right.
So they both kind of put in their vote.
Yep.
So maybe you as the teacher, like, is it on a scale? A scale?
It's like 1, 2, and 3. It's super super
like,
super fast.
Like yes, kind of, no.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's a lot of schools are moving away from like 100% like percentage type grades. They're moving towards mastery based grading. There's this whole philosophy of mastery based grading.
I could appreciate
which
that.
is incredible. It says that and mastery based progression is like moving forward. You move forward when you've mastered something, not when the teacher decides to.
Right.
So we rely heavily on mastery based progression. If you don't master a skill in the first time, that's fine.
Right.
The next time you jump on, it feels a little bit random what you're getting.
Oh, really?
But you always engage with skills until you've mastered them, and that's when you sometimes get them as a teacher. So from the user's experience, from the end user learner's experience, they're just jumping on, and sometimes they do this thing, and sometimes they do that thing, and they see older skills kind of fade away over time, and they see newer skills start to happen more often. But we make sure that people don't move on until they're ready. And then we also get to cycle back, and we're watching a whole community of people learn, and we get to say, hey, like, everyone's moving people forward with this remaining misconception. So we build a new session.
Right.
That so just in front, somewhere in the pathway, we put something in front of people that they needed. So there's two ways people can, business owner customers can engage with us. One of them is say, hey, we're going to do the whole thing. You're going to teach us how to build skills in your platform, and we're going to keep an eye on it, and that's great. And the other way is to say, like, hey, SKALE, we want you to meet with our domain expert, build out this curriculum, and then watch our learners learn, and then adjust the curriculum based on what you're seeing. And that's a lot more handheld, and I guess that's that offloading ownership more version where like training as a service.
Right.
But it becomes, like you said, it's the end goal.
Right.
You want people to
master the results.
Concepts over time and master them deeply enough to build new concepts on top of.
Right. And I was kind of thinking about the idea of, well, once your sales force is trained through that first curriculum, it's like, do you loop back? Or it's like, that's kind of a new opportunity to use that first curriculum as a platform for possibly like a level 2 curriculum or whatever. That excites me because I'm a relentless learner.
I had kids in my math class go 4 years of math in 1 year. I want to say that slower because I just realized I sped through.
No, I heard what you said.
4 years of math in 1 year. You get to the end of the year and you say, well, there's still more. Let's go find that. I had to hire a...
they were just so...
I removed the limit.
Yeah.
I said, hey, go as fast as you want. I'm not going to
that.
stop you. And then they said, okay. And they took it as a challenge and they flew. Their little brother was coming up behind them, and like they knew I was at the school, so they sent their little brother from 8th grade over to my high school because I removed the limits. He's now 11th grade and he's taken 3-dimensional calculus or something like that.
Whoa!
But we had I want to say her name, but I won't.
Right.
For this learner, as she got she was clearly at the front of the class always, and the only person who she could get help from was me. So I did two things. One, I hired a TA from the local community college
to
come over and be in class. And then I also took all 5 of my math classes and I put them in one. So I had 150 kids in class at the same time. And what I got from that is I got more matches. So the kid at the back of the class who was always being taught, now sometimes that kid would get to teach because there were things that kid had mastered that no one else in the class, that someone else in the class needed help with.
Right, just he's in a bigger pool of people. He's bound to know something that somebody else doesn't.
Yeah, it flips the whole class student-teacher ratio argument on its head. And we're like, oh, we got these smaller class sizes, and that's really expensive. And we're saying,
well, yeah, when you start letting people teach each other.
Yeah, big class.
Yeah.
Big class, more teaching, more one-on-one, more student-centered learning, more student engagement. It's crazy.
I love not abiding by standards in accomplishing any goal. Like, I mean, that's the way what I want you to do is tell me what my goal is. I'd like to know the traditional way of doing it. I will shred it apart, look at all the weak points, and just throw them in the garbage. Do
you find that it makes it harder for you to dive in with a team who's established, like, here's how we're going to do the thing? I can never take attendance.
It's like most people, and I'm not even afraid to say that, but like most people have like an innate fear of doing something outside of the ordinary. And for me, I find comfort in removing myself from the system. And so I'm not, I can't imagine that that's a common preference.
What do you mean? You expand on that, removing yourself from the system?
The way it's always been done.
Okay.
For to kind of keep it broad, right?
Yeah.
The way it's always been done is one of the quickest ways to limit yourself. Now, there's always something to be lost when you ignore the status quo, the systems that be, when trying to solve a problem, right? Because there's a lot of that's good, so it's like, if you're not too careful, you'll throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But ultimately, it's because my mind is like a creative mind. To me, it feels more restrictive than helpful. I can learn the system in a kind of educational way. Like, let me read about it. Let me just like study it. And then, like I said, shred it apart, poke holes in it. Try to keep what's good for the most part, because there's no point in reinventing what works.
Can you do the other? Can you fall into someone else's system and just and operate in it? I'm asking. I struggle to do that. I've heard that like a lot of entrepreneurs are unemployable.
I'm kind of blunt. I think my wife would tell you that. Like, not because like I'm blunt with her. Well, she might think I am, but like I'm blunt with people. So her and I will be talking about an interaction I had with somebody, and I'll tell her what I told them. And she's like, there's no way you said that to them. I'm like, no, I definitely said that. And I didn't say it in a mean way. Like, I just called them out that the way that they're approaching the situation is, making them go slower, or they're losing money, or, but just tell them. And, perhaps if we, but you always kind of have to propose the solution. You can't just like, you just put somebody down.
They talk about like first principles thinking, and like this is actually something that I have like struggled back and forth with. Right, like there are some rules that I follow to a T. Gravity, like I follow that. I follow it all the way. Like physics, I'm in.
Right.
State and local laws, for the most part, I'm in. For the most part.
Those pesky federal laws, though.
But then you get into like convention, and you start to say like, okay, what? So I've had to take some things that are not gravity and treat them like gravity, and I actually use that word sometimes in my lexicon to say, no, this one's gravity. Like my marriage is gravity. Like,
right.
Like the place I live,
like non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though one of my biggest strengths is negotiating all negotiable rules or conventions. I had to say, okay, this one, gravity. The place I live, gravity. And Teal and I, my wife, fought for years about, I need to be in the city. I need to be where the most, like, this type of innovation happens.
Who was wanting it more to be in the city?
Me.
Right.
and she like for her, like this is where she grew up. This is a beautiful place, and I think a lot of your listeners will be local to Auburn. We're just outside of Auburn here as we record this, and a lot of there are a million reasons to stay here. And at some point I had a mental flip, and I said, you know what, this is where my wife wants to be, and why do I want to go do that? I'm gonna learn how to do this really well from here,
right?
And it made my life better to recognize this is not something I'm going to consistently evaluate. This one's gravity.
Yeah, it's ignoring the social mirror and looking at yourself, and being the other half of you is your wife, right? So I think a lot of your longing to be in the city was a social mirror thing.
Sure.
I mean, like, how could it not be, right? Because that's quote unquote where it's at. Yep. Is in, in the city, in the Silicon Valley, and that's also where a lot of the insanity is. I'm not talking like geographically. I'm not like pointing fingers at the Bay Area. What I'm saying is the social mirror in general, the concept of looking what everybody else is doing, and there's something to be said for immersing yourself in a culture that you want to affect you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but there is, in my mind, like, it's kind of unfortunate when people just do things because other people are doing them.
Sure.
For just the raw fact of that.
Yeah. The amount of most of us fall in mimetic theory. We fall into the lines of what other people are doing most of the time.
Right.
And every little 1% reduction of that you can get is freeing.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even if like sometimes you sit down to dinner and everyone's buying $50 meals and you're like, I would be just as happy if I got a Big Mac next door.
Right.
I'm going to not eat. And all of a sudden you walk out, you're like, I just broke from
the mold.
From the mold for a minute, and wow, I have $49 in my pocket to do something different with. And we most of the time don't do that. And most of the time, like, go have that steak with your buddies. That's fine. But every once in a while to break it is big, and is worth it. So it's a balance, I guess. And then, like, for me, I think one of the things that could wrap this back around to, like, what do you do externally? What do you do internally?
Right.
As a team, the SKALE team is also something that's become gravity. And the things that they need in their workflow, the things that each of us need differently in our workflow, learning how to work really well together, and one person who wants to have our files organized where he or someone else could find them. And I'm like, I don't do files.
Right.
Like, wait, hold on, shut up.
So aside from you,
yeah,
you have other, I'll call them partners.
Yeah.
And they have general, let's call them roles, right? Like, you don't have to like call them out personally, but like, what are the roles that exist?
Yeah, I'd love to introduce. My co-founders are Ben Cheng and Wei Sun. They met each other singing a cappella at MIT. They wrote code.
Cool for me.
They wrote code. They wrote music together before they wrote code together, and they're incredible. And they're very different from each other. Wei is our CTO. Wei studied mechanical engineering all the way through his PhD at UCLA. It sounds like I'm bragging right now, and it's just true.
I'm actually just kind of amazed.
And then he went to Apple for a little while because he recognized that the future is in software. So he was working on the Apple Watch and an AirPod, like, data science team, making it so that the Apple Watch knew if you were running, even if you were pushing a stroller, or knew that you were skiing, which it doesn't really very well yet.
Right. I use my Fitbit for like 5 things.
Yeah.
I'm not trashing on Fitbit. Like, it's actually really incredible, but it's like, I'll use it to see what kind of sleep I got, but really I'm just checking my heart rate at the gym, and I'm using it as a watch and a silent alarm clock.
Totally.
Which is most of the features, I suppose, but I'm not using like what most people would probably use a Fitbit for, which is like all the exercises that are built into it. Like, I'm not going to stare at my wrist when I'm at the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to tout why this thing is why the watch is an incredible piece of technology. I can relate that back to learning, but I'm not gonna, because I'm introducing my team.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry. No problem. This is the nature of the thing. And he is he's the structure of the company,
right?
Like, he's a CTO, so I think like he built the core of the product, but now it's about building the core of the organizational system that lets us make sure the right person gets the right information at the right time. That makes sure that
It's like
that our
making
holidays, like that people know when our holidays are. Like I'm sure it's
making the tool smart.
making the tool and the organization
Right.
smart.
Right.
And then Ben's a poker player.
Mm.
So MIT computer science, NSA.
Wasn't he in a movie?
Startup experience.
What is that movie called?
No. Oh, like the MIT poker team.
Yeah.
21. The
Yeah,
blackjack
yeah,
team.
yeah.
No.
That wasn't him, was it?
No, but he's like he probably knows those guys. His dad
I
was,
bet it was.
Michael Jackson's.
He's just not telling you.
Limo driver. Random factoids about my team. But his work, like I heard someone shared like what he did. Like we're all spinning plates, and whenever he sees a plate about to kind of wobble over and fall, pushes that plate back up or puts some time in with that person. And then like incredible strategic thinker. His work is to turn money into more money, and find the right opportunities. And so we'll follow him into a fire, obviously. And then the rest of the team around us is...
I'll follow anybody that plays poker really good. That's really very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how we paid bills early on, before we were making any money.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the founding team. I could go on to rave about everybody else too, but...
Right. And you said this is about 5 years in the making.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's... I feel like the 5-year thing, there's something about 5 years. I don't know what it is. Like, this is not science. This is... Like, 1 year is not a long time.
No. But it compounds. So you're
right.
1 year... Like, I come back to that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we know today...
Right.
In a million dimensions. We know about our customers. We know about teaching and learning. Our product is better. We've built materials to explain our product better. We know how to work better together. All those things
contribute. Yeah.
And so I push learners and entrepreneurs specifically to, when you think about, I have a graph in my head, but if you don't, I would Google like an exponential curve and look at it. And you'd see the beginning part is very flat. If you have 10% growth of almost nothing, it's growing very, very slowly. So the work of being patient in the flat spot and sticking with things is it unlocks the ability to do a million more things in your life than you'd be able to do otherwise. And the two things that you have control over there are the time invested, the time you spent in something, what you started with. Actually, you don't have control over what you started with. The time invested and the effort you put in.
Right.
The effort's kind of fixed. Like you're going to put in the effort you're going to put in. The time is really the only thing that you have control over. So,
but then there's
that
like
behooves you to start. And
there's like
stay.
super people in this world, though, right? Like you take this dude wanting to send rockets to Mars,
sure,
and it's like, how does he do it? And it's like, well, I don't think the guy ever sleeps.
Sure, but also
like
he spends a lot of time starting things. He'll try. He goes.
Right.
We're talking about Elon Musk, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, this doesn't. I'm not able to relate this back to SKALE, but
that's okay.
Something about, but it's also an entrepreneurship podcast, and so, there's something about planting a lot of seeds and seeing what grows.
Yep.
Like if you go out to your garden, well, not now, it's raining. That's what all that speckly noise is. Should have mentioned that earlier. You go out to your garden and you plant.
So if you're listening to this, like grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, close your eyes. You're in a little rainstorm.
That's right.
Yeah.
You go out to your garden, you plant a bunch of seeds. It's like you actually don't know which one is you don't know which one's gonna sprout.
Sure.
It's almost like a law of nature, and it's like I'm not saying you should spread yourself thin. But let's put it this way, between you and your partners, you've had a lot of ideas along the way, I'm sure.
Yep, and as we grow with great people, everyone who joins comes in with a lot of great ideas too. And now there's this train going. So how to make sure those initial ideas, these people who have fresh perspective and come in with critique about what we're doing or new ways of doing the work, making sure that gets integrated, even though it didn't have the benefit of compounding over the last couple of years, is a challenge. And one other benefit of SKALE, not to oversell the thing over and over again, is
no, it's like you're on the show, so
sure, is the fact that we're no longer talking about a one-way propagated knowledge. It is, because it's two-way. you do get to extract the great ideas of people throughout your organization. People share
it's more of a network.
More thinking than they would if they weren't talking to each other.
Would you say it's kind of like having a learning network?
Yeah.
In some form?
I don't know that
like
concept.
It's not a formal. It's some BS I just made up.
Sure.
Like
your company becomes a learning network.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just in the generic way, where each node, each person is a source of a signal, or of a lesson. I should just keep it not. I get really like metaphorical.
Oh, you want to get way metaphorical? I want to take you're planting many seeds and talk about artificial intelligence and augmenting your data set. And
do any of your partners have any experience in AI yet, or whatever?
Yeah, I spent the last 3 years working for NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a large tech company in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And I've been building their AI curriculum. AI is an interesting thing to try to teach a community.
An AI curriculum?
Yeah, so teaching developers and data scientists who work NVIDIA's customers or internal employees how to start their first project in AI or adopt some new workflow in artificial intelligence. Their technology they sell as a GPU happens to be the chip that 90+% of AI queries are done on. So
is the GPU graphics
processing unit.
I have one in my computer. It was very expensive.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's awesome.
Yeah. You could be training AI neural networks to do some of your work for you. And my work was to teach was to get a scalable curriculum into the hands of hundreds of thousands of developers who or first hundreds of thousands of teachers who would go get hundreds of thousands of developers to go do these things. And it's a typical like train the trainer program.
Right.
So imagine you are an owner of a business and you've never heard of SKALE and you're like, hey, I need to get my people to know something.
Right.
But I'm not going to be the trainer all the time. You're going to hire a person who's the trainer. Maybe they have experience in the domain. Maybe they have never done it before, but they have some teaching pedigree. Maybe they were a teacher. Maybe they've trained for some other company. So they either and then they listen to you the way that I'm saying that I would listen to you. They build some curriculum, like some workshops,
right,
or a blog or make some videos,
mm-hmm.
and they put them out in front of your people. And then your people who are experts listen to this non-expert who's a good teacher tell them things mostly that they already know in a way that doesn't actually make sense. And so if that teacher is not very good, or maybe that teacher is a practitioner, maybe the other side of the failure point is they were a great salesperson. They got promoted to be this teacher role, but they're not a teacher.
They're just really good at selling stuff.
They're really good at selling stuff.
Right.
So in the NVIDIA example, it's like having an engineer stand in front of the room
mm-hmm.
and talk at the room where everyone sits down, shuts up, and listens.
Right.
And they're up there talking about the thing they think was most interesting, this new math formula that they just discovered, the way
way over everybody's head.
Yeah, and that they're excited about.
Right.
Which I'm probably doing right now. So you have this kind of like two failure points. Either it's a teacher who doesn't know the domain, or it's a domain expert who doesn't know how to teach.
Mm.
And here what we get is we build the structure for teaching.
Right.
So every conversation is a structured conversation. When you jump in, there's little cards on the bottom of the screen that say, like, if I'm the teacher, it'd say, ask Cody what he already knows about blank.
Oh, right. The what he's talking about is because I got to demo the app a month or so ago,
mm-hmm.
or however long, and like imagine having a Skype session on your phone, a video call, and Mike actually had taught me something, but he had these cue cards that he's talking about, and what they are, the actual words superimposed onto the screen that cued him to ask me certain questions, correct?
Yeah. So like good teacher questions that make it so that the learner is talking and not the teacher, make it so that just kind of instigating the best practices in teaching and learning. But the person who's doing it is a domain expert because they just do it every day.
Right.
We've certified that they've mastered that little skill, that specific skill. And so the conversations are both rooted in domain expertise and good teaching conversations.
Mm.
And to come back to your Stephen Covey thing, they
mm-hmm.
say like sharpen the saw.
Yes.
And like steel sharpens steel. So just getting in a problem that I found at NVIDIA
mm-hmm.
was that we were trying to like have someone who wasn't the right person for the job do something in a really loud way. Like they would go out and teach hundreds of people. Maybe it's in a different language than it was originally written in.
Oh, wow.
And
so
there's so much loss in the system.
The microphone was huge. The audience was huge, and the message was compromised.
Yeah. Yeah. And we never knew what anybody had learned. Never knew what they were ready for next.
Oh, so then there's no data tracking it. And this is all actually kind of solved with this solution with SKALE.
So I kind of, I'm thrilled to
I have so many ideas.
Put this in places. Yeah.
In places that it could be applied.
Yeah.
Like I'm even thinking like, oh, what's somebody going to say? Oh, I can't use it for my company, because we're hands-on, in the field technicians or whatever. And it's like, yeah, well, when you hire somebody new, you got to run them through safety, don't you? You got to teach them how to use the tool. I mean, even like you could even give like a crash course on the tools of the trade before you allow them to go out.
Even like you get a window washer who is going to go wash the windows, but then afterwards, what can they bid the next? Can they talk to the homeowner about when their next visit should be scheduled?
That's right.
Like those little things.
It's like how fast can you actually
want people to be doing?
Yeah,
and you have to go back otherwise because that window washer can't do it.
Yeah,
and yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I think that this was a good long talk.
Yeah.
Like I think
Sure.
now to recap, if anybody's made it to the end of the episode, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, this. I should make it clear. This was our Auburn Business Ventures Goldmine podcast first recording. I'm not sure if it's going to release in this order, but
thanks for having me, Cody.
At any rate, thank you for coming on the show, man.
I'd like to for before we do shut down, if there are business owners, local or not, who just want to jam on training.
Of course.
Our thing does scale pretty broadly, so it's like
you can apply it broadly.
Yeah, what I mean is like you'd want to have 10 or more people involved to really get a lot of value out of SKALE, the software product.
Right.
But I'm always looking to figure out how to serve smaller teams, and have got a lot of gems about how to just build some of this stuff with a spreadsheet to just make sure these conversations are happening in your business. And if you're in the same building with everyone every day, you can do it with really, really rudimentary systems. So
what's a good way for somebody to contact you?
I am Mike at theskale.com. That's THESKALE.com. Or I'm on Twitter at Mr. Mendelson. I was a teacher. Those are probably the best two ways.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Fist bump. Oh, yeah, that's hilarious. Goodbye.
Goodbye.